Hey guys, and welcome back to another edition of the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. And I am your co-host, Ray Russell, here this week. Want to welcome everybody back to the program. It's been a couple weeks, took a week off, but we are indeed back in business. And last we left you, we promised you we were going to dive back into 1975-76, talk more about Bob's career there in the Florida territory. And we're going to bring the man himself back onto the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back, Bob Roop.
Good to talk to you again, Ray. I mean, we were talking about a few seconds ago. Of course, that was off the air, so yeah. This is different. We're now official. But, yeah, it's good to be back onward and upward, right?
Absolutely, as always good to talk to you. And I got to start recording our off-air sessions for, like, bonus episodes because we're just sitting here and out of nowhere you bust out some Road Warrior stories. So I got those in the back pocket now. We'll save those for a future episode here. Some good stuff, some more roadie stories, because for those who don't know, we talked about them before on the program, but you were there, at the infancy of the Road Warriors, and you said you roomed with Hawk for like 6 months, and wow. Yeah, that's going to be some interesting times when we get back into that era of Georgia Championship Wrestling circa the early and mid-1980s. But this week, guys, we had promised we're going to dive back into the mid-70s, your run in Championship Wrestling from Florida, your big run in Florida. You're a main eventer now, big main eventer, Bob Roop. Actually, you're about to get a tag team partner in Bobby Orton Jr., but before we get back into all of that, I'm sure everybody, if you don't know by now, Kevin Sullivan, the legendary wrestler and booker Kevin Sullivan, passed away just a few days ago. And Bob, you had a lot of time around Kevin in Florida, in San Francisco, and a lot of people have been asking, is Bob going to address, the passing of Kevin Sullivan? And I know you wanted to do that at the top of the program.
Well, I'm curious, and that's the second time, because we talked about that off the air. Mm-hmm. People want to know. I'm curious what people want to know. What they might have seen about Kevin in regards to me over the last, let's say 30 years, is Kevin knocking the crap out of me, and whenever he gets a chance to, about me trying to steal Ron Fuller's territory. Or I'll put it to you this way. That's all ancient history. The last two times I've seen Kevin, one was a year ago in March. We did a Vice taping. We were with Steve Kern, Brian Blair, Jerry Briscoe, and Kevin and myself. We were all Championship Wrestling for Florida graduates, had all worked there extensively. And we did a section for Vice News. And then I saw them at the get-together in Charlotte. We were also together for a Florida thing. But, I mean, if you're there and you're with somebody, especially if you're working with them, even if you've had, if there's been, say there's bad blood, I don't know exactly what that means, but, there's animosity between you. What I did both times is when I saw Kevin, I walked up on him because both times he was ailing. His back was hurting or something. He was sitting down when I got to wherever it was. I always approached him and went up and said, well, how's it going to be? You want to try to get along? I'm willing to let bygones be bygones. I said, I don't have any heat with you. I offered my hand, and both times he shook it. And then, of course, a month or two later, I'd see him back on the air saying something else nasty about me. But, I don't hold grudges. Kevin had a great career. You talk about coming from different backgrounds. I came in, we talked about that extensively, of the break I got when I came in because of my background with the amateur wrestling and the Olympics and all that. Kevin came in diametrically opposed, the absolute other end of the extreme of the continuum. He went to school, a wrestling school, with a guy named, I don't want to say Kenny Hill. I had a wrestling school in Florida that Eddie Graham just hated the guys that came out of there. I didn't know until later on, much later on, in my knowledge of Kevin, I didn't know that's where he started. But to go get started there and to reach the heights that he reached, it took a lot of doing, a lot of effort, determination. He worked hard. Kevin was about 5'9", which is not, it's not immense. Kevin, what he did, I think he got some help. I think he used some chemical help, but he worked out. He got big. If you broaden that upper area, all of a sudden maybe you only gained, say, 15 pounds of muscle, but you look about 50 pounds heavier. And that's what Kevin did. And so he put in the work. I got to hand it to him. The time I spent directly in his company, when we came back down together, he and Mark Lewin and Luna Vachon with the Prince of Darkness stuff, no matter what they were doing, no matter what kind of chemicals were being passed around and booze being consumed, one thing that he and Mark Lewin did, which I didn't do, is they went, and Nancy went with them. She was with us, and she would go to the gym too. But he was working out, and they were putting in a sweat effort to look good, and they worked hard at it. So I got to give him credit for that. Also, the guy was really, really ambitious. He worked hard. He kept one of the real ingredients for success is perseverance. If you keep trying, you keep at it, even if you fail and fail and fail, if you keep trying, eventually you're gonna make it. If you do it that way, that's the best way because it means something. We talked earlier about the Von Erichs and Mike Graham and people who were spoiled by having things too much handed to them in the form of money and privilege and being able to buy new cars as soon as you get your driver's license and that kind of thing. Whereas Kevin Sullivan is coming from the opposite end of the continuum of having to, I think he had a family when he got started. His first marriage, I met his wife, and I think he had a couple kids. I met his daughter. When Kevin came to California for me in 1977, I don't know if he brought him with him. I don't remember.
Okay.
He was a baby face top of the hill. I never even went to where he lived. We talked on the phone a lot.
Right.
But Kevin, even then, he was hungry. He had a lot of good ideas, and I would talk to him on the phone, and he would pitch these ideas, and they were good. The idea, of course, bringing his father out there for us to use as a way to get some serious heat on me and some serious sympathy on him was a real stroke of not just genius, but it was smart too. You could have, because anybody could have done it. Your father could have been in a wheelchair. You bring him out there, and instead of giving him a shoulder breaker, I just try to turn his wheelchair over, or something like that, to get the heat. Kevin was ambitious. He had a great career. I think his career was, first of all, it was 3 times the length of my career. He certainly accomplished 3 times as much. So I got to give him credit. He hung in there even after McMahon kind of took away all the places you could work. Kevin still managed to find work and at the very highest level. Yeah, he was a good booker, a good worker. He and I want to praise Kevin, but I also want to point out the reason we had conflicts, and I've mentioned this before, was that as Meha Singh, I was told that I was going to be let's put it this way, Kevin engaged me in doing this gimmick. That it wasn't just like I'm going to pretend to be somebody else and maybe paint my face. I shaved half the hair off my head,
right,
and half my face. You talk about a goofy-looking guy walking around. I mean, people look at me like, "What? You're nuts. What's your problem, buddy?" And you're talking about feeling like I'm kind of a private person, and I don't like people looking at me, staring at me like, "Oh, what the hell is that?" When I had it, I didn't wear the handkerchief thing on my head to cover it up. If I was going to do the gimmick, I did it everywhere. But I also wasn't out taking walks every day or going out in crowded shopping malls walking around. I was keeping myself. But anyway, the character was meant to be Meha Singh and Bob Roop. And once we got down there, he basically killed Bob Roop. He never let him come out of the character. So later on, he kind of screwed up. He screwed up his booking, his chance to be a booker. I ended up getting a booking job instead, only because Kevin made a mistake of not staying in contact with the boss, Hiro Matsuda, and letting Matsuda know what was going on.
Right.
Matsuda was worried about having a TV the next day, and so he had me do it. And so Kevin came back, and he and Mark Lewin did some things in the ring that basically they were trying to get fired, and I did fire them. So that, of course, rankled with Kevin. He brought me in there, part of his gang,
right.
Prince of Darkness. I had to end up, and I didn't have any choice. He forced me. Had Steve Kern pull his tights down on TV, so there's this white butt, it's tanned everywhere else. This untanned butt is just sticking out there. pointing at the camera. I mean, there's no way you can. What they had to do was they had to edit the tape before they could send it out, which it cost several $100,
Right.
and a frantic kind of a rush to get it out to Jacksonville in time, in the places where it bicycles. So, and Matsuda came to me right after that TV show, which was on a Wednesday. We had a big show coming in Orlando on Friday. He and Mark Lewis are both involved with matches. If you had to substitute for a mate, like he was going against Kendall Windham and Mark, I don't remember who Mark was going against, but at the very least, I wanted to get something from them before they left. So I didn't fire him. And so that was on Wednesday. He exposed his butt. Then on Thursday, he and Mark went out in Jacksonville. I don't remember against who, but they did the Three Stooges stuff where Kevin went to like poke him in the eyes, and Mark put up the hand in front of his face for the Three Stooges stuff right in the ring. And all the boys were out watching it on the stage because Kevin and Mark had told them what they were going to do. Oh, and they're looking at me. I'm watching these guys kill the town, or at least hurt it seriously with their crap. And the boys didn't understand that what these guys were doing was hurting them too. If they had to come back to Jacksonville, say the next week, well, they weren't going to draw anywhere near as well after that kind of expose. Mm-hmm. So this isn't sounding much like a tribute, is it?
Well, you tell it your way, Bob.
Well, I'm trying to say why there would be any reason why we had a contentious relationship. So anyway, I had them work they worked their matches in Orlando, and both of them were suspicious. They both were asking me, am I going to get fired? When I told them what to do, they were going to both get beat that night, and they were booked in Orlando on 2 days later. So it didn't make sense for them to get beat, booking-wise. So they both asked me, am I getting fired? And I said, well, should I fire you? And they didn't want to say yes. So after Mark worked, I went and hid because Mark got beat. And I knew Kevin was going to be wanting to question me. And then Kevin went out there, and after he worked with Kendall Windham, the thing that was funny, Kevin didn't go out there and do the meat chopping thing against Kendall Windham. He went out there and worked a high spot type match, which was actually a very, very good match compared to just the meat chopping and, you don't do anything. You just go out there and, you're just a bloody savage, and mm-hmm. So when he came back after the match, I met him coming as he came back into the hallway and leading the dressing room. And I said, hey, Kev, I said, good match. I forgot you knew how to work. I said, by the way, you're right. You guys are done. Nice for last night. So he didn't like that too much. And he held, we had to work together again. The reason I'm telling you this, just hearing it, is that Kevin had a reason to be knocking me. He had a good reason for it. I mean, he did bring all that on himself. I mean, what else was I supposed to do? I had no choice. But by the same token, I was the one that did it. Of course, he resented it. I retired not long after that. That was my last booking job, and I retired and raised my boys, and it was Mr. Mom and all that. He went on to, he had great runs, and, he made a lot of money, and he stayed relevant as much as he could. Mm-hmm. I actually saw him on TV up in Michigan working for Eddie Farhat. The Sheik was dead, but his brother was running a promotion. I saw Kevin up here even working for them. So, he stayed relevant. He kept himself relevant. And at all these conventions and things, he's very welcome. I think he had a lot more attention and respect or consideration than I did because I'd been retired for so long. And, I had a short career. A lot of people come to those conventions might not even had any awareness who I was. Since he worked as long as he could, he was a lot more relevant. Interesting guy. He had a great career. He came a long way, starting from the very bottom. It's sad how it turned out. I think he got hurt his back somehow. And do you remember exactly what caused his demise?
Well, what I read online, and that's all I can go off of, really was there was some sort of an accident, and that caused some really bad health issues. And he went through surgery. I know he had some complications from that surgery, And in the last few months or whatnot, he really wasn't able to function independently anyway. So Kevin was struggling there for a while. It seemed like they're near the end. It's very unfortunate. What referred to online was a devastating accident. Now, was it at home? Was it in a car? I have no idea. I didn't really dive deep into what caused or how this all started, but unfortunately it took a turn for a worse, and Kevin passes away from it. I was sitting there listening to you tell the story, and I get it. Like, there was business issues between you two, but when we discuss Kevin here on the show, when we're talking about storylines or matches, San Francisco, for instance, or when we're talking off air, just before we went on here, we're able to dissect, we had issues here with business, decisions and things like that. But man, he was a hell of a worker, and you're giving him his kudos in regards to, he really started from basically nothing as far as professional wrestling went, and he worked at it, and he was, headlining everywhere at some point, where even got to work a little while in the 70s back for Vince Sr. up and worked the Gardens. So Kevin Sullivan did make the rounds from Montreal to Gulf Coast to Florida to Tennessee, New York, of course, San Francisco with you, Georgia, and the list goes on. And he would, like you said, Vince swallowed up the territories, and it came down to basically Vince McMahon and Jim Crockett. And Sullivan finds his way into Crockett land, because let's face it, if Sullivan had been taller, I think he would have easily been plucked by Vince McMahon. But because of Sullivan's height, was never going to happen in New York. So he goes over there and he finds himself a managerial role, a wrestling role, eventually a booking role in WCW. He basically is the booker for the majority of, that Hulk Hogan era, if you will, of WCW. He had to kind of befriend Hogan in the way he talks about how he had to gain Hogan's trust so that he could, because Hulk Hogan, whether you're the booker or not, Hulk Hogan has the say, right? So you got to kind of get him to trust you. And he worked hard at that. And yeah, he did some cartoony things there to keep Hogan happy initially there, but he really worked behind the scenes all the way to the very end, it seemed like, with the company. So Kevin definitely, as you said, stayed relevant both in the ring as well as behind the scenes.
Well, it's a good, and I've been reflecting. If you and I are a tag team, I'm definitely the heel, and you're the babyface. We're a mixed tag here but what you're saying is correct. Kevin had a lot of good points, and his career speaks for itself. I mean, what was it, 40 some years, more? I don't know how he was still active, going to these reunions and things up until the end. He had a great career. He's a name that, if you hang around for a while, he's going to be remembered. And yeah, what you said, like, I pictured him trying to go up to New York during the Hogan era when he first got started, to try to see him as a heel against Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan was, what is he, 6 inches taller? Now, I'm arguing with myself, because I remember working with people who weren't big, like, say, Frankie Kane. Frankie Kane was 5'8", and he did that Mephisto gimmick, and I worked with him when he was under a mask, under a hood, and I worked with him when he wasn't. He was doing the Arab thing, but he always had that loaded boot. He had a weapon on him with that loaded boot, but he was 4 inches taller than him when I went out and wrestled against him when I first started. Nobody ever felt like he was the underdog. They were worried about my health. They weren't worried about his. Yeah, the height is not always necessity, but, by that time up there with Hogan, Kevin might have fit in if he was just one of a gang of people. Like we talked about Dusty down in Miami, where Dusty had a B superstar, Billy Graham, and then had people like Pak Song and Ox Baker and Dick Slater and Dick Murdoch and a couple Samoans, and all run in to attack Dusty. And then Dusty beat them all, hit him with the elbow or whatever. And then he beat Superstar Billy again, got up and tried to attack him, and he beat him again. And so he beat him twice. They beat up everybody else. Well, I've reflected on that for a long time, and I know that Dusty is the one that booked it that way. And the reason that worked okay was because he didn't destroy any one guy except Superstar. Not destroyed him, but hurt him in the town. You weren't going to be able to bring Superstar Billy Graham back on top anytime soon unless you did something on television where he came back and maybe Dusty had his mother out there for Mother's Day and Billy Graham slapped her or something, where, you could get some serious heat instantly. But the rest of the guys, Pak Song, and I don't remember if Stomper was there or not, but Ox Baker, all those guys were eligible to, come back, and they could work with Dusty the next week, just do a little something on TV. They could come back in Miami. And so I use that as a reference because with Hulk Hogan, it was kind of the same way up there in WWE, or at the time it was WWF. But didn't Piper Pitt, didn't he have a gang of guys? Bob Orton and
Roddy was actually brought in initially because of his size, not necessarily his height, but his body. He wasn't a giant per se like a lot of the other guys. So when Roddy was initially hired, they were going to use him as a manager, as a mouthpiece. But he was so damn good and got so much heat, they had to start putting him in the ring within a month or two.
Yeah. I came home from a match one day. I might have told this, but I still remember it. My wife, who was smart to the business, my wife said, but she was kind of a nippy mood. And I remember she was ironing. I said, what's the matter, honey? She said, I just hate this guy. I said, who's that? She said, Roddy Piper. I said, what? I said, how do you want the boys? She said, I know. She said, but he is so annoying and irritating. She said, I just hate him. And I thought, oh my God, you talk about he's smart to the business.
Yeah.
He knows he's working. Yeah, you talk about having some serious heat stick. Here's the bottom line. Did he draw? Yes, he did. So whatever you put him with, he would draw. That's the bottom line. It doesn't matter what the guy looked like,
Right.
But,
that's not so much, obviously on Kevin. He went and made it work for the opposition, if you will. It was more on Vince, whether he wanted to hire someone or not. And I don't know if there were ever talks, because I've never really deep dived into, Kevin's interviews and whatnot, if he ever talked about going back to the WWF or if there was an opportunity or an offer there. But I think he would have easily got lost in the shuffle, as a lot of the smaller guys did, no matter how talented they were. With Buzz Sawyer they gave him a shot. He lasted for a very, very brief cup of coffee, though I do believe that was for other reasons we won't mention here. I'm sure you can figure them out, Bob. Also, Ronnie Garvin comes through there, and he's barely a level above curtain jerker when he's with the company. And that was after he had been the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, mind you. Yeah, right. So that's just how, Vince is booking.
Yeah, I had talked to Ronnie many times about that when I used to go down to see him in the summertime, years after he was up there. Vince had him refereeing.
Oh, yeah, they had the gimmick. Yeah, they had the gimmick with him. Yeah,
and then, he got into an angle with
Valentine.
With Greg Valentine. Ronnie was making money. I told you the part about where he was flying guys around.
Oh, yeah.
And he had his own plane. And he was making some serious money up there, so he didn't mind that at all. And one thing, what do you ever say about Vince McMahon? There were times when I would be visiting Ronnie, and he would get these in the mail. He would get these royalty checks for something that he did. Okay. Wasn't much. Sometimes it was $50 or $20 or whatever. But anything that he was on that got aired, he would get a pay. He would get a paycheck for it. And I always appreciated that. I thought that McMahon was, a lot of promoters, they wouldn't do that. They wouldn't share the bacon. They wanted to have all the money themselves. Back to Kevin, I think Kevin was a positive for the business. He did kind of the same thing we were just talking about with Dusty's thing. Kevin had Mark Lewin. Whenever King Curtis came around, King Curtis also became part of the group. He had me. He had Luna. There's always at least 3 or 4 of us. You could have the run-ins. You could have the odd man lurking in the bushes to come out and throw up a gimmick or do something.
Yeah, I think the only thing missing from that stable was Chris Colt, because he just felt like he belonged in that. But that's another story for another day.
Colt, Fargo, you could put those guys with anybody, and all of a sudden it would take a serious turn for the weird.
Before we get into, the other topics that we were going to discuss here today in regards to your career in Florida, I just had one quick question for you in regards to Kevin Sullivan. I know we were talking off here just a little bit, and you said your first memories really of, maybe you had crossed paths with him by this point, I'm not sure, but your first real memories are, this is very timely for this episode because this is around the time Kevin Sullivan's going to come back to the Florida territory and you're going to cross paths with him here. I believe he was a babyface and you were working heel. So you guys probably worked against each other at this point, but I'm assuming you saw something in Kevin here in Florida because you're going to leave Florida at the beginning of 77 and take over as booker in San Francisco. And the first thing you do is hire Kevin Sullivan to come out and work a program with you on top. And of course, we know how successful that was. It tripled the business there in San Francisco. So my question is basically, what did you see in Kevin, who was basically a mid-carder here in Florida, that you thought we can make money together?
Well, I was looking at wrestling stats. We're talking about 1976 today. We're talking about 76. I went ahead and looked into 1977, and I found in January that I went some tag matches with Kevin being one of the opponents. So, yeah, that would have been where I had a chance to see him in the ring. And, he was a fresh-faced young guy, good shape, probably in his 20s, I think. When I got up there, I didn't go out to California to book. I went out there to work. I ended up getting the book.
Yeah.
But what I was looking at was all the baby faces I had out there had been there forever. Even Pat Patterson. 20-some years, after a while, you get in the law of diminishing returns. And let's see, who was the Mexican guy?
Pepper Gomez?
Pepper Gomez, sorry. Yeah, Pepper had been there forever. And it was a place he could come. And, there was a lot of Hispanics in California. So, he would draw a little bit. But, we didn't have any fresh faces out there. I started looking for some. And I had to fire one of the guys. So,
sorry, Al Madrill.
Al Madrill. So, Kevin, I'm pretty sure I called him. He came out and, the rest is history. We popped the territory. And I mean, it wasn't just him. I tried to make every match mean something, not just to mean that, but the philosophy I learned in booking is to have something red hot and something that's maybe about to come to a boil and something that's warming up and something that you just put on the stove where you're going down the card so that, you have a progression so that you don't do a big blow off and you have nothing to come back the week after that.
Right.
You want to start cold. I mean, it makes obvious sense, but
right. If all issues are resolved in one big arena show, where do you go from there? You have to rebuild everything at the same time.
Right. So, yeah, I needed guys up and down, but Kevin, I knew Kevin and I could work together. And the other thing, what I mentioned, and I give him credit, one of the reasons that Kevin did so well, first of all, he was very, very ambitious, which is good. I mean, you're in a business that's very competitive. Guys all competing to be on top, to be in main event. You're competing against everybody in the business, certainly in your own territory at a time. And if you move around like he did, you got to go everywhere. And even if you start on top, you need to be able to draw, and you can't leave it to the promotion to ensure that you draw. So, I mean, you can, but if you have your own ideas, we talked about this with Bobby Shane, of being able to come in there and float ideas before he comes. So we do this, and this. He's talking name, he's talking matches, he's talking about dates. He's giving whoever's listening to him. Usually, it's would be the booker. He's giving us specifics about what they can do, and Kevin had the same kind of idea. Certainly after that, he would, again, for a guy that didn't have all the physical, he had a great physique and all that, but he was 5'9". He did have that, with the purple haze and all the guys around him. Just about everybody except Lono was taller than him, but he was the main guy. He was the prince of darkness. Everybody else was just acolytes.
Right.
So he did great. He went a long way in his career, and I got to hand it to him. I respect his wrestling ability to the max. Any personal issues aside, Kevin had a great career. I hope that all of his fans out there understand I respect his career as much as he did. He and I were fighting or competing at the very highest level. Kevin competed at the very highest level and succeeded. It was successful. He stayed relevant for all these years, even when it was very hard to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say, rest in peace. I wish any fans and family and friends of Kevin, you have my sympathies. I'm sure he'll be missed. I try to dwell on the positive things, and I remember a lot of positive things about Kevin. We did that well out there in San Francisco. We didn't pop the territory and like a Hulk Hogan did in New York, but we did double the business, and always be grateful to Kevin for that. He was a stepping stone in my career as a booker. I mean, I was the first. I had booked towns in Florida, but I hadn't been the guy in charge until San Francisco. So
Right.
having done well there, even though I got fired for trying to steal the guy's territory, I still had a good record as a booker. So nobody else cared about my little political thing. They said, well, if he can draw money, if he can book, we'll use it. So anyway, rest in peace, Kevin.
Yeah, from the Boston Battler to the Prince of Darkness to the leader of the Varsity Club, all the way to the Taskmaster in WCW. Rest in peace, Kevin Sullivan. And I grew up on Kevin in WCW, NWA, and I have fond memories. Didn't always get into everything that he did. He did some weird shit sometimes, Bob. But Kevin was awesome. And it was always great to listen to in regards to explaining the business and psychology of the business and whatnot. So definitely, truly, a pioneer of that era of the 70s and 80s and into the 90s, really. He transcended a couple of generations there. And that's why I think we talk about people still remember him fondly today. He tried to stay relevant. He was... Even if he popped up for Jim Cornette and Smoky Mountain or Paul E. and ECW briefly, he was always around doing something. And Kevin has always found a way to pop up and stay relevant, and I think that's why everybody remembers him so fondly. It's just cool that you got to spend some time in the ring with him, and you guys got to make some magic out there on the West Coast, and that's always going to be there, Bob. That's one of the biggest feuds, really, of San Francisco history, if you ask me. So very cool stuff.
Well, even thank you, Ray, for cleaning up the disaster I left on your lap for my little say goodbye to Kevin. But I look at the Prince of Darkness thing, where I was to the Mayhaw thing. That was a great experience. It was his idea to do all that, and it wasn't successful, but it was an interesting experience.
Oh, it's definitely something different. You got to do something completely different.
Oh yeah, and I got to see what it was like to have an alter ego, which is completely different. I was Mayhaw Singh when I was out with that in public. I didn't go up and introduce, go up and say, "Oh, hey, I'm Bob Roop."
Right.
I wouldn't say anything to anybody. Generally, I didn't say a word because Mayhaw was supposed to be this Indian nut job. I was out in public as little as possible. But yeah, Kevin was. He did very, very well in the business for a guy with his limitations and the way he got started. He came a long, long way, and my hat's off to him.
Very good.
Hey everybody, Gene Jackson here, inviting you to check out the Retro Wrestling Review, where each week I'm joined by some great co-hosts who help me review classic episodes of USWA Championship Wrestling, and right now we are doing week-by-week reviews of 1993. But we don't just do reviews, sometimes we get a chance to interview some of the people who were there and lived it, plus do watch-alongs. It's a lot of fun, so check out new episodes that drop every Wednesday at WrestleCopia.com. And to find links to everything associated to the podcast, you can go to USWApodcast.com.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Pro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puroresu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And of course, now would be a fantastic time to become a WrestleCopia patron. I'm talking about that $5 all access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts for just $5, including all of my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of The Grenade Show, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to a lot of the podcasts here on the WrestleCopia brand, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. We also offer remastered versions of the earliest episodes of The Grenade Show, covering the 1989 NWA project. Includes enhanced sound quality, plus new content and conversation never heard before. But that's still not all, guys. You also get at least a dozen digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure each and every month, plus random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series covering mini past WWF and WCW events. And if that's not all, videocasts, also now a part of Patreon. And for those who like all of their podcasts in one nice, neat little pile, the WrestleCopia Patreon also offers a Patreon exclusive Spotify account. You can actually go over to your Spotify with your WrestleCopia Patreon credentials. Instead of listening or downloading directly from Patreon, you can go over to Spotify, listen to all the latest shows, including all of the early releases. And you get all of that and so much more for just $5. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month, guys. I think you'll like the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into paying the bills. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia. Help me pay some of the bills to keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
All right, guys. Well, you wanted to hear what Bob might have to say about the passing of Kevin Sullivan. Of course, you guys crossed paths quite a bit there for a number of years. So there you have it. Rest in peace, Kevin Sullivan. And I'm sure his name's going to come up time and time again as we continue on telling the story of your career. And that's what we're going to do right now, guys. We're going to dive back into, Bob, your run in the mid to late 70s here in the Florida territory.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So, before we move into 76, I just want to point out, in 75, you'd won the Florida title, the heavyweight title, and the Florida tag team titles with Roger Kirby. Now, you and Kirby are going to lose those tag titles to Cyclone Negro, Omar Atlas, back in the summer of 75, but you're going to hold that Florida heavyweight title into September. And for anybody who wants to guess who defeated Bob Roop for that championship, if you said Dusty Rhodes, ding, 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 you'd be right. Imagine all the names you could come up with. Dusty Rhodes, of all people, the Florida heavyweight champion. Who'd have thunk it? But I wrote here in my notes, Bob, if you got to lose to somebody, it might as well be the American Dream, baby.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I was looking at a lot of matches, and it wasn't just the angle I did with Steve Kern. where, we started out in lights out matches. We were in our third or fourth get together or, matching in towns. We would be already to a cage match or, a lumberjack match or something.
Mm-hmm.
We started out at that level. We didn't, a lot of times when you have an angle, you start with somebody and if you're cold.
Right, slow build. Well, the story you guys implemented, I think, added a lot to that. I think there was a reason why you guys were going out there within a couple of weeks, and you guys were, that's when we get there. I got a lot of, I don't know about questions, but a lot of discussion I have here in my notes that I would love to talk to you about when we get to that part of 76. But yeah, that's a huge part of your Florida run here, because you go from, not that you hadn't main evented plenty against the Grahams at this point, Dusty Rhodes and things of that nature, but you do the team with Bob Orton and you're working semi-main a lot. And then when you and Steve run that angle on TV, you guys are instantly the main event in a lot of towns, and for good reason. The heat was there, and I'm sure it was drawing.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm looking forward to getting to that here in a little bit. I don't want to jump ahead because you did some good things in between, and I'm going through my notes. You get to work some with Billy Robinson at the tail end of 75 going into 76. Now, we've talked about Billy in the past, and we've talked about your opinions on Billy, and what he would do in the snake pit and things like that. But do you recall yourself wrestling Billy Robinson and what that was like?
I was looking at matches. I didn't realize I'd worked with him a number of times.
Right.
Mostly tag matches, and I don't remember the matches, so everything was okay. I do remember the one match I remember. We were working a single match, and it was a spot show. It was some little town, and I was feeling my heat, and Billy just decided he wanted to come back. So right in the middle, I don't care if he's more experienced than me. I mean, I knew what I was doing by this time. And right in the middle of, I wasn't anywhere near ready. I didn't have the heat up to the level I wanted it. Nobody was really angry yet. And he decided he wanted to come back. He kind of forced me into going to the finish. And I went ahead and did it. I don't know if he beat me. It doesn't matter. Whatever it was like 60% of what it could have been. And I went to Louis Tillette, I think was the booker, and I just said, don't book me with him anymore in single matches. I didn't want to get into a shoot with him. It didn't matter if it was justified or not. All that's going to do is, I would have been fighting that shooter thing since I started. I wasn't about to, come unglued and go against somebody for real. The fact that the promotion made me wrestle against people from the audience, anybody who really is going to go out there against a professional wrestler in front of an audience and not expect to get killed, they have got some shortcomings in terms of their mental ability. What do they think is going to happen out there? Mm. So, but the fact that I had to do it in public, well, it wasn't just the audience watching. The boys were watching that too. So they saw me go out there and put guys out and, take them, suplex them on top of their head and do all these things that were painful and, knock them out, put them out, make them unconscious. And so they said, well, when they were working with me, they thought, I dang sure don't want to see that side of Bob Roop. So I had to fight that my whole career because it made for, if guys were afraid of me, it made for lousy matches. They didn't need to, there's nobody needed to be afraid of me unless they had some, negative plans for me themselves of trying to screw me around in some way. But that didn't happen either. One thing I noticed about this time, apparently I had some serious heat with a lot of people. I was having bull rope matches with Dusty Rhodes. I was having Texas death matches with Jack Briscoe and all kinds of different, these specialty matches. You don't start out with somebody, the first match is a Texas death match. You would have had to build up to that.
Right. There were certainly some things going on television or something to lead to these things. And yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of what led to a lot of these things. Now, you have a vivid memory of your feud with Steve Keirn, so that's a good one, to discuss here on the show. But I did, when I see that, we're coming to that at the beginning of 76, I really took notice of the names that you're working. And it's kind of interesting, specifically in Florida, and some other territories did this too, but sometimes you would be married to a certain guy or have a certain, if you want to call it a feud with someone in just one town in Florida. So let's just say Orlando. You might be just working, say, dusty roads 3-4 weeks in a row if you guys are telling a story just in Orlando or West Palm, for instance. You do a loser leaves town at some point here. I think it was with Thunderbolt, but I could be wrong. And I noticed you leave town, you leave West Palm, but you don't leave the Florida territory. So, and obviously you'll come back in a few months to that city again, but that's kind of interesting. The way things worked with how the booking worked there was each city was individual in and of itself sometimes in regards to, say, storylines or specific feud or just stipulations like that.
Well, with Monday having 2 towns and Tuesday having 2 towns and Friday having 2 towns, you could, in those towns, you could do the loser leave town because you got another town you can be booked at for 6 weeks or whatever until you come back to where you've been banned. You come back under a mask, or, you do something on TV where the guy who beat you for the loser leave town asks you to come back, ask the promoter to send you back. There's always ways you can get back. But by having those 2 towns, because you weren't going to take a top guy and leave him off, if he lost the loser leave town, or that night of the week he wasn't going to work, you would be able to go to the other town, you come back under a mask, or, all those gimmicks that they would use to get around the stipulation. But yeah, I guess it was time for me to go work in Orlando for a while. If I lost the loser leave town there, that was interesting. I just saw Thunderbolt last month at Waterloo.
Hall of Fame. Yeah,
it's good to see him. He's hanging in there. In fact, at the banquet, I sat at a table with him and his family, wife and daughter, and I'm not sure, but and his son-in-law. I sat next to his son-in-law, and he was a real good guy. It was nice to talk to him. Yeah, and Thunderbolt gave the invocation. He made a very nice prayer. And yeah, it was nice to see him after all these years. But when he came down to Florida that time, man, his head was in the wrong place. Because he was personal friends with me. We'd been in Australia together, and he'd been decent to me, and he was more experienced than I was. He kind of helped me along, and so I had gratitude for him and affection. But I worked my butt off to get him over down there because it was good business. He could get over. I mean, he was a guy that if you let him beat you, you put him over, he would get over, and by getting over, he would start to draw money. That was my job. I didn't care about getting, wins and losses in pro wrestling. They don't really mean what they do in a lot of other sports. So, yeah, I worked hard to put him over. And at one time, I told you, I said it before, I talked about he didn't want to drop the belt on TV, and I had to fire him day. But, bygones be bygones. I never did ask him about why he did that time. I thought like maybe it was too, it might be painful, or he might have forgotten about it. So I didn't bring that up with him. He's a likable guy. He's a good man. Who knows what forces or pressures he was feeling. Who knows? So there might have been something going on behind the scene I had no idea about. Down there, the place we were at when I fired him was the Snake Pit. That was the name of the place. Was the Florida Wrestling Office, and that is its nickname, and not affectionately, but realistically, it was called the Snake Pit.
Right. It wasn't just named that to be cute. Right.
Oh man, there's horrible things happening in there. Guys got beat up, got lured in there, and ended up, just getting beat up and hurt, and some of them are semi-crippled, and lured in there for that to happen. So yeah, it was what goes around comes around, and it certainly did down there. We're talking about it now. A place that you think about. I was looking at one of the cards, one of the battle royals, and you talk about names. Nick Bockwinkel was one of them. You talk about the names that they would come down to Florida to work. You had some of the best people in the business come down there. Maybe they didn't stay there for long, but went through there and worked there for a while. And even if it was one of those short 2-week things in the winter, you had some of the top names in the business come down there, and they all worked. They worked on TV. They were there at the Snake Pit. Mm-hmm. So you had some really great guys come down there, and yet in spite of that, having a lot, and I'm talking about a lot of good people too. I'm not talking about buttheads. I'm talking about guys who were good guys come through there, and the place is still called the Snake Pit because of the people who, and not. I want to differentiate I don't mean that for Duke Kiyomuka or Hiro Matsuda. I don't consider them as part of that. Maybe there's in some ways responsible. I think Eddie was the one that was the primary factor in a lot of the nasty crap that happened there.
Mm-hmm.
His desire to protect the business and his personal reputation. His personal reputation was wrapped up in championship wrestling from Florida or Florida Championship Wrestling. So if the business was attacked, it was almost like personal to Eddie. He was synonymous with championship wrestling from Florida. What goes around comes around. That did for him too. But I have fond memories of Florida, not stretching Hulk Hogan when I had a chance to. Well, I'm glad I didn't. I mean, he didn't ever want to talk to me. Later, I never did anything to him except when he was still playing music. I went to a couple of his shows and danced to his music. But anyway, but all those guys went through there. The Briscoes were there. We talked about it on another show. All the guys that Eddie started or gave breaks to, both the Briscoes, me, Dusty, all those guys left him. He lost their respect to the point where they just didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Right.
So that's sad.
The Vice people did a dark side on the Graham family, and they were talking all about the snake pit and the things Eddie would make you guys do. And a lot of people, in the past, and I don't want to get into it on this episode because I feel like it could be its own episode, so I want to save this. But, we talked about in the past where you were basically forced to go in there and do certain things to these fans, if you will, who were coming in there for a quote unquote tryout, which really wasn't a tryout at all. They didn't know it. We talked about what he's ordered you to do and what Eddie liked to do afterwards, kind of knock the guy silly and bust him open and things like that. But in the middle of that Vice, story, when they were going through that, there were other people recollecting their memories of being forced to do these things, and not to your level because they weren't amateur Olympians, stretchers, shooters, hookers, things like that. But even Kevin Sullivan was on there, and he told a story of he had to do that one day to a guy. And the guy was, Kevin said he was talking to him, he was working with him at first. And Kevin was just doing, basics. And the guy, Eddie overheard the guy say, I don't remember if he shook Kevin's hand or whatever, but he referred to Kevin as, you're a nice guy, The guy was basically having what I would call a good time. Okay, he was treated correctly, I guess you would say. And Eddie heard that. Can you imagine what was said next? Eddie Graham calls Kevin over and says, if he doesn't leave here bleeding, you're done. And so Kevin said he was forced to, bust this guy up to keep his job. He had to feed his family. And people don't really understand that, and especially nowadays, I would just quit the job. Well, it didn't really work like that. And so much like you and so many other guys, Kevin said, he was forced to go over this guy who had done nothing to him. And it, up to that point had been cordial with Kevin, was cool with Kevin. And now he's forced to just be a complete piece of garbage to him and, kind of maim him. And Kevin, I don't know if this was for television purposes or not, but Kevin said to that day when he filmed that, I would assume in the last couple of years, he said that's probably the worst thing he's ever done, just done to somebody for no reason. Yeah. And, that goes back to that sadist. It's crazy. And Eddie using you guys as pawns. He doesn't get in there and do it. You guys go in there and do that. And he just sits there and watches. And it's we talked a lot about Eddie recently on here, but there's a whole episode. I kind of been piecing together stories and whatnot in regards to things like that I definitely want to do with you in regards to some of the things that guys were forced to do, if you want to call it that. I guess you guys did have the option technically, but you really didn't. Not if you wanted to keep your job.
That's another situation where Kevin and I were, because of our backgrounds and because of what I had with me was my background was, the Olympics and being an amateur wrestler and all that. It gave me some bit of power. I mean, it gave me some stature that you just, throw me away like someone like Kevin, where they're going to have to make him. I had made myself a little bit just by being an Olympian before I ever walked in the door. Now, they had to teach me how to take advantage of it, teach me how to work. But I gave him a lot to work with. Whereas Kevin was starting, like I say, he went to a little local school down there in Florida. I don't know if Florida office ever knew that. Because I don't know if they would have hired him if they knew that. I want to say Kenny Hill.
Ron Hill, I believe it was.
Ron Hill, okay. Really hated. I hated him. He sent me over there 2 or 3 times during my career. There were some guys running he sent me over there one time. It was funny. The Japanese office, I'm not sure which one, but Hero and Duke had a connection with Japanese promotions. I'm not sure if they were different ones or all at the same time, but they were talent going back and forth. There were guys from Florida going to Japan. There were Japanese wrestlers coming to Florida. This kid came down. He was very unusual for a Japanese guy. He was about 6'3", big, tall, not skinny, but lean. Eddie sent me and him. One of the local, they were doing a show in a little town, I don't know, maybe 50 miles from Tampa. Eddie sent me and this Japanese kid over to discourage them. And we went over there, and where they were running, there was an abandoned gas station where they had taken out the lifts and all that, where you lift the cars up to work on the underneath. They had taken those out, and they'd leveled the floor somehow. So, but it's a gas station. And so, they've got maybe 30 chairs set up. They got a ring, and they got room for maybe 30 chairs. So, I mean, how big is she? They got no TV. I don't see anybody with a camera. Even if they were taping it, where are they going to play it? I don't see how these guys are a threat. I mean, the most you're going to get is 30 people to watch them. They're doing this like all the little local. Anyway, we went there, and we pulled up to the building, and I saw a guy. I was watching from across the street, and I saw these guys go into the front of the gas station, like one of the big garage door, like open to a bay that you would drive your car in. They would walk through there and go in. There was a room in the back, which was probably the office or whatever, and they would go in the back. So I decided I want to go around to the back. I want to see if I figured there was a back door. So I told the Japanese guy, I said, you stay here, and, if you get the idea that there's any kind of a problem, I said, I'll let you know. So I went around to the back, just opened the door, walked in. It's like, I don't know, 20 guys in there. Local guys, they're there to wrestle. And they're in various stages of undress, getting their boots and tights and all that. Boy, when I walked in, they knew who I was. They recognized me. I'd been on TV down there for years. So I walk in, and it got real quiet. And this one kid, this one young man, I think he was maybe part of the promotion. He went in his bag, and he pulled out a .357 Magnum. Wow. And he set it down on the bench next to it. Yeah. So I said, well, what are you going to do with that? I thought I was supposed to be the shooter. What are you going to do, shoot me? So I'm talking to him, and I'm insulting him. I'm saying, I hate, first of all, I hated doing this. I despised this. But you're talking about Kevin having to do things. This is what brought this story up. Eddie asked me to do it. What am I going to tell him? No. Mm-hmm. I don't want him to know I'm not going to do it.
Right.
So, yeah, I got to go do it, And so, I wouldn't go in there and beat anybody up, but, go down there and, tell them they're jerks or whatever. So, I went in the back, and I said, so you guys are wrestlers, huh? And I wasn't saying, you're a bunch of crumb bombs and all that. But I was basically showing them, what are your backgrounds? You guys where were you trained, Well, I calmed the guys down a little bit. And everybody realized I stood in the doorway. I wasn't about to go in there and try to get the door shut behind me, because there were 20 of them. And the guy did have a .357 Magnum. So I'm talking to him, and after about 3 or 4 minutes, there's a curtain from behind the door. And actually instead of walking through a door, there's a curtain there. And all of a sudden, one side of the curtain parts, and the Japanese guy stuck his head around the edge of the door and looked in the room, and all those guys noticed him, and they said, oh my God, we're trapped. They got both doors covered. The guy with the gun picked the gun up. He's pointing at me, pointing at the Japanese guy, waving it back and forth. I got my hands up saying, hey, calm down, But when they saw the Japanese guy, and he did look it'd be like just like in a movie. If they're a nasty looking Oriental,
Sure.
like James Bond movies where
Cicada, Odd Job.
yeah, appears around the corner with that nasty Japanese face. They said, "Oh my God, we're surrounded. There's two of them," and I think it's a funny story, really, because the guy picked up the gun, his hands shaking. Oh my God, the two of them must have kind of, I just said, I said, you guys, whatever.
You guys go on and run your little show. Would they draw like 8 people?
I don't know. I just stuck around, but see, that's what's so ignorant about Eddie doing that kind of stuff. We could have gotten shot.
Right.
I mean, you don't know.
Well, Eddie wasn't there.
The guy's hand.
It didn't really matter, did it?
No, he wouldn't do it. That's that. So yeah, that was one I thought was funny. In fact, I never saw that Japanese kid again. I don't remember. I don't have any idea who it was. But yeah, Eddie had a way of overreacting to things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in baseball, you have the major leagues and you have little league. You have t-ball, where you have kids 4-year-olds hitting a ball off a little stand like a tee, just there, and they just whack at it. Well, there's difference. You know the difference between the major leagues and that one over there. That's for 4-year-old kids. That's t-ball. Well, I always told Eddie, I said, Eddie, why don't you make it plain? I said, the imitation's the most sincere form of flattery. These guys that want to be pro wrestlers, but they don't have the ability yet. If they had the ability, they'd be working for you.
Right.
That could be your line and way to deal with it. An indication that you're successful is people want to imitate. They want to be what you are. So instead of taking it as like, it's like these people are insulting you, actually they're flattering you in a way. And all you have to do is tell them, say, hey, if your banker buddy asks you, or your major league friends, people at the newspaper, if they ask you about these guys, say yeah. Just say yeah. It's a minor league. There's a minor league promotion over there. They're trying to do what we do, but they don't. They can't beat anybody.
It just seems like you call these. I guess this is even. I don't even know if I want to call this an outlaw promotion because it's really not even that built up. This Ron Hill promotion here, but it just seems like, especially certain promoters, NWA promoters, I should say, just wanted to be the only game in town, no matter how big or small these little outlaw pop-up promotions would be. They simply didn't want them. They were unwanted, and they handled business quite often. We talked about how they screwed over Thunderbolt when he tried to, pop up in Georgia there. They screwed over Ann Gunkel. Now that was some big time competing. This year with Ron Hill trying to run a show with maybe 8 guys or whatever. It's crazy to think that Eddie sent his henchmen, if you will. Sorry, Bob, sent you guys over there to kind of persuade, play the part of Rocky. Hey, maybe you guys don't do this no more. And but on reflection, that's the reason I left Florida and didn't want to go back, was being asked to do that kind of crap. Paul Bosch was never going to ask me to do something like that. Right. I can't even assist.
Chris would, but Paul wouldn't. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that story in years until you talked about Kevin having to do things.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that story. Very cool. I mean, not cool, but still very interesting.
It only works. I make a reference to another one, that one where after Fritz Von Erich did ask me to say you're going to be taking on these guys, I went and wanted to get martial arts training to become even more versatile in ways I could, not just defend myself, but the way I could attack other people.
Sure.
Not just with wrestling, but with kicks and punches and chops and that kind of thing. So I'm working out with this guy and he's kicking the crap out. I'm not. When I say kicking the crap out of me, he's kicking me with these pads on his leg. I mean, it wasn't hurting me, but it was pretty good. It was pretty solid. He was scoring. Let's put it that way. He was scoring points by what he was doing. Halfway through the second lesson, I asked him, by the way, what are the rules? What are the rules here? He said, well, there are no rules. Well, oh, really? No rules? And I said, okay, let's go. I took him down in about 2 seconds. I had him down on his face, pulled his hair back, and I pretend punched. I just brought my fist up to the side of his face about 4 times, like I was punching him. I just touched him. I didn't punch him. I said, boom, 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 boom. I said, you're done. And I got up and left because now there are no rules. Well, the shooter thing, like me being a shooter, the deal with that is we're somewhere where we can compete, like in a ring or a mat or something, but we're competing under certain rules, under certain guidelines.
Sure.
I'm not taking on guys with guns or knives or spears or on a horse or driving a car. I'm taking on guys that are going to wrestle. So when the guy pulls out a 357 Magnum, I don't have any takedowns that's going to work against that.
Definitely not.
All that being tough stuff, it's all relative to whatever situation you're in.
It's crazy that, you got to work your shows. You're wrestling every night in the Florida territory, but at the same time, you're doing all of these things in the snake pit. You're being asked to go and, strong arm these little tiny outlaw companies, and that didn't really seem to work out too well. Did you tell Eddie? Do you remember speaking to Eddie afterwards and saying, "Don't ask me to go back there again," or was it just kind of forgotten?
No, I didn't. I didn't ever approach him that way because he was able to establish, especially when there were people around. When we were one-on-one, it was completely different. But when other people were around, Eddie was able to bring out a persona that will be the guy in charge, and he was. He ran the company. He made the payouts. He's the guy that got the money first. When they would bring back bags of money from Miami in cash that they took from the box office, it came to Eddie first. They would bring it back to the office and dump it on a table while Eddie would be in there by himself with the money. Louis Tillette told me a story about bringing money back in a paper bag, big paper bag, big grocery bag, and just dumping it on a table or putting it on a table and leaving. And then Eddie would be in there, and then Eddie would deal with it, and then he'd make payoffs. He might give Louis $100 or whatever for bringing the money. I don't know. So he was the guy that when you're in control of the financing and the funds, you're basically in charge. Having that, I mean, even with Duke and Hero, he was administering their money too. I mean, they were partners. They were junior partners. Mm-hmm. But in fact, one of the beefs that Gordon Solie had, I know I'm all over the place here, but one of the beefs Gordon Solie had was that Eddie, he complained to me about when we'd had a few drinks together. Well, I was drinking just to make it through the day booking. He would come up to the office and sit there with me, and he knew I had a bottle of rum in my half-gallon of rum in my drawer, so he'd come up there and we'd drink together, and he'd get maudlin and start telling me stories. And one of the things he was upset about was that Eddie never smartened him up. I mean, he knew it was a work.
Right.
I mean, it's obvious, but Eddie never officially. He would always kayfabe him when he was around. He wouldn't talk shop when Gordon was in the room.
Wow, interesting.
And the other thing is Gordon knew about the money too, and Eddie never offered him any of the money either. And that was one of the main beefs he had.
I could see why Gordon, for all of his faults as far as being a grumpy guy off camera, Gordon really helped sell that product for a long time.
Yes. Oh yeah. He was one of the best wrestling announcers. All that stuff he made up about holes, or what he called them.
Yeah.
His ring psychology. Well, there were a lot of the guys I worked with, the announcers, they didn't come up with that, that repartee about what was actually going on in the ring, like or talking strategy or philosophy of what somebody's doing out there. Gordon was very talented because he was both the announcer and the color commentator for hundreds of shows, which takes talent to do both. But yeah, he was pissed off because he didn't get any of the money, but it was insulting that they didn't smarten him up. But you know what? Eddie knew that Gordon was friends with the newspaper guys too. And Eddie didn't smarten those newspaper guys up either.
Right.
In fact, he talked like they wrote it like it was a shoot. They would give results in the paper, and they would do advertising in the paper. There was never anything on the sports page knocking wrestling, pro wrestling. There was never anything, saying it was phony or, manipulation or whatever. Eddie had really good public relations when he was sober. Mm-hmm. Eddie knew that Gordon drank with those guys. They would get together at the sports announcer, whatever. There was a bar not a bar, but a club they all belonged to.
Okay.
And Gordon would go there every day and drink his lunch, and you couldn't tell. The guy could drink like, I mean, oh man, he could outdrink me and 3 or 4 other guys, and you couldn't even tell. Eddie knew that he was meeting with Tom McEwen, from the head sports writer for the Tampa Tribune. He knew he was buddies with all these guys. He wasn't about to officially smarten them up. I mean, Gordon, of course, he knew. I mean, they had to tell him times, this is what's going to happen. So you know what was, well, obviously, if you're telling him you already know in advance, the guy's going to be coming out of the ring right to the desk. And how do you know he's going to win? How do you know he's not going to be crippled during the match and not be able to come to the desk? So obviously it was a work, but the fact that Eddie never officially smartened him up, and I don't blame Gordon for being insulted, but I can also see it from Eddie's side. Eddie considered Gordon a necessary evil. And the fact that, you know what it might have been? The reason maybe he didn't smarten him up was because Gordon was an alcoholic. And I'm not making that up.
No,
His daughter
I think that's pretty much
wrote a book.
right.
Yeah, she wrote a book, and she said, I read the Solie Chronicles before I ever said a word about Gordon to you, to our listeners, because I wanted to be, I didn't want it to just be me. No, his daughter admitted that, he was an alcoholic. He could drink straight vodka. One time we were in South Florida trying to do a midnight getting into the studio to do something for our show at like 11 o'clock at night. We kept waiting. It took them forever to get the controls. They had 1-inch tapes and the big reels of tape, and it took them a while to get set up to start. While we were waiting for an hour, Gordon had me go get him something to drink. I couldn't find a liquor store. I went to a 7-Eleven. I bought him a couple of quarts of wine, and I brought them back to him. And about 10 minutes later, he came back and said, hey, go get me some more, will you? He finished those 2. I went and got him 2 more. He finished those 2. So I had 4 bottles of wine, 4 bottles, in about 30 minutes, and went out there and did the show. You couldn't tell.
Wow.
Couldn't tell he was drinking at all.
Yeah, I remember a story Tony Schiavone told, and I'm not bashing Gordon here. This is just elaborating on this story. Tony Schiavone told a story. He had to do some tapings with Gordon at some point. This would have been WCW, so it would have been later on. But he said it was very rough. It was very rough going with Gordon. Gordon just wasn't really getting into the groove like he normally would be. And Tony went and got him vodka and a bottle of orange juice. And he said it was smooth sailing from there. Anytime he ever had to work with Gordon, he always gave him that vodka and orange juice, and Gordon was gold. So it seemed like and that goes back to the whole alcoholism thing. He needed that to function. And once, like you said, you couldn't tell on air. You certainly couldn't tell. And
make sure to get the cigarettes too.
Yeah.
He was a 4-pack a day man. 4 packs.
With that voice, I would have guessed 6, but yeah, okay, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, throat cancer's what got him, I mean, yeah. And Gordon, we all have our demons. I said a few minutes ago, I'm the one that had a half-gallon of rum in my drawer. I wasn't Gordon; it was me.
No, right? Yeah.
So I mean, I was drinking too. I'm not knocking Gordon for drinking.
No.
I mean, stress makes you do different things. But I drank heavily for a long time in my life, and the excuse I give myself is that I was suffering from PTSD. And I needed help to sleep. Now, I didn't drink during the day. Gordon would start lunch. I mean, no, wait a minute. When I was booking, by late afternoon, if I didn't have to go to a show, I would have a drink or two just to unwind a little bit. But after the show that night, I would drink and I wasn't drinking a fifth a day or anything like that, but I did it every night for a long time. Mm-hmm. I said it earlier, I'll say it again. It's one of the things in my life that I was really, really ashamed of. But it can be a habit. When I finally did quit about 17 years ago, I think, it took about a week, and I realized I wasn't an alcoholic because I made up my mind. I mean, I just said I'm not going to drink anymore. I got a DUI, and I first one I ever got in my life. I said, well, you drive 3 million miles as a wrestler and never get one, and you're driving it out in the middle of the night because you can't sleep. You get one at home. It's a stressful business. And life can be stressful. So I'm not knocking Gordon for his drinking, but he was an unhappy man, unfortunately. So what you see is not always get, is it?
Sure. No, definitely a difference between, the stories that come out about Gordon behind the scenes versus, the way he was portrayed on air. This very eloquent, the way he spoke and explained wrestling holds and backgrounds of the wrestlers and why this move hurts and the pressure points and this, that, and the other. And then off air, Gordon was just, sitting back having cocktails. And that's not a knock on him at all. I'm just, it's just going over somebody's real life persona or a real life, shouldn't say persona, their real life, who they are. But it's so good that, he was in the business for as long as he was, because he went, he would go start doing Georgia. He even did Alabama for a while. But, Gordon was the host of Florida Forever. He really brought that into the new world. That was Eddie Graham changing it up, getting TV and hiring Gordon as the announcer after kind of sliding Cowboy Luttrell to the side. And Eddie kind of taking over and really made Florida the big boom there. Gordon was a part of it from the beginning when it really surged. And he was here, basically through the demise for the most part. So he certainly played a big part here, especially in the Florida territory, but also down in Georgia as well. Let's try to get through a couple of names here this week, Bob, before we close.
Okay. Well, I'll just say one last thing about Gordon.
Absolutely.
He opened the show and he closed the show for all those years. Mm-hmm. He was the first thing you saw. He was the last thing you saw when you watched championship wrestling for Florida. So, he was over. Yeah, he was over.
Absolutely. So I was looking through my notes here and your results. You teamed some with a guy by the name of Frank Goodish, who will go on to be Bruiser Brody. You had some of his first matches. We talked about that down in Texas. And here you are teaming with him a little bit. There must have been some sort of a feud going on between you and various partners, Gary Hart Army men. So you guys against Omar Atlas and Cyclone Negro, quite a few matches there. Now, Cyclone had worked Amarillo with you. He had been there for something like 8 years or something straight, and finally leaving that territory. And he's been getting over here in Florida pretty damn good. He was working with Rocky Johnson a lot in tag team matches against you in 75. And now fellow Venezuelan Omar Atlas in here as his partner. I believe they portrayed brothers here on TV, if I remember correctly. But this entire time, ever since that heel turn, you've been working for Gary Hart's Army. And now you're automatically plugged into semi-main events and main events just by default because you're part of Gary Hart's crew. So like you said a little bit ago, you're working against the likes of Dusty Rhodes, Thunderbolt Patterson, pretty much every night in the early part of 1976. But another guy comes to town and you work some matches against him as well. It's a guy you ran into in Australia. And I'm talking about Big Bad John. And I don't think we talked about you crossing paths with him here in Florida. We talked about Australia. Do you remember meeting John again here in the States?
Yeah, but no, we didn't. We didn't. We couldn't hang out together because we were up guys. But
heel and face.
He wasn't bad. He wasn't bad in the ring. He was, I could have a believable match with him. But I saw much more of him and about him in Australia. Mm-hmm. We could hang out, and I hung out with him a lot over there. He was an interesting guy, like Chris Colt was, and like other guys that I found interesting because completely different from me. But John with his carrying a gun around all the time, admitting that he was a pimp. He had a girl on the street, all that, thinking it was cool. He thought that was it was great to be doing that. He liked being the gangster, I guess. He was interesting.
Well, it caught up to him, unfortunately.
Oh yeah. Well, you never know what happens. But I don't. You know what? The matches must have been okay, because if they were disastrous of some kind, I would remember more about them. But you gave me a revelation just a second ago when you talked about me being part of Hart's Army. Because I was looking at these matches, and I had not taken that into consideration. All of a sudden, I'm in these matches with all these different people, and I don't mean just regular matches. I'm in Texas Death matches and
lots of gimmick matches.
With all different guys, and that's what it was. It was by getting together with Gary Hart. I had all the heat from the group, as well as my own personal heat. So if you beat me, you're also beating Gary Hart in the Army, in a sense. So that's why because I was looking at that, I was thinking, well, why don't I remember that in some kind of different light? Because one outer excuse I gave myself was that I wasn't blind to the business of thinking, well, this is all real, and I'm going for the world title tonight again. I knew that titles were given. I mean, the ones I had were decided by the office for me to have them. So I knew that, and so it didn't make, even if I was going in a world title match, it didn't resonate as being anything really special, because now if there was going to be a title change, that would certainly be special. If I was going to become world champion or something, it just didn't resonate as being anything special. But as I became part of that collective of Gary Hart, I don't know how long I stayed in that, because I didn't like it. I didn't need a manager. The way you get over is through interviews. It's not what you do in the ring. I mean, Dusty was very limited. Junkyard Dog was limited in the ring. I'm not saying Dusty was limited, but the act he did, the shtick that he did present, was fairly cut and dried, fairly simple. Go out there, get over a little bit, a little brief heat, get juice, they can come back, beat the guy. That worked for years and years and years. And Dusty had the office hold where Dusty might have even been up there in the office bringing in different people. Said, hey, I talked to so-and-so on the phone last night. He's finishing up in Texas or wherever. He wants to come in. Let's bring him in, and, he'll be good. We did this and this and this, and we'll do it again. So he had the ability to do that. Being part of the collective, I didn't get any interview time, or very little. And that's how I got my heat, was with interviews. The whole thing, when we do get to Steve Keirn, the whole angle, every part of it came from a 2-minute interview.
Right.
So, every bit of every calorie of the heat involved, if it got up to 300 degrees, every degree was from that 2-minute interview. So, and not just what I said, but Steve Keirn's reaction to it. Well, we'll get there, but interviews is what you do to draw money. And the guy being a guy, look at Dusty. Dusty became a great interview. He actually he had a lisp. He worked that into his interview where he talked different, but it was different. People said, no, he doesn't talk like everybody else. But he made it a positive. It worked for him. It made that lisp probably made him $3 or $4 million. My hat's off to him. So I didn't like the idea of not being able to do interviews. Gary was a great talker, but I didn't need one. The thing was, they probably certainly didn't have time for everybody on there.
Right.
Group.
You have five heels doing 5 different things. Gary could just flush it out in one promo or 2 promos.
Yeah, because Murdoch was a great interview. I mean, he was believable as he could be. Mr. Tough Guy, Hard Knocks, Southern boy.
I don't know how articulate Dickie was on the mic, but man, was he entertaining. I'll give him that much.
Well, he was convincing too, because what he did in the ring. He'd go in the ring on TV and beat the crap out of somebody, and then he'd come out and do an interview. Well, after what you saw him do, destroy somebody.
Right.
When he came and made the interview, well, you believed him. And you know what? He was real. He was a fight waiting to happen. He's just looking for somebody to punch. So, wasn't the kind of guy I wanted to go drinking with, quite frankly. I wasn't looking for fights when I went out drinking. I was looking for a good time, but he, interesting guy. But no, and Gary was great. We talked about him earlier with the plane crash and stuff. Gary was a great mouthpiece, and Pak Song needed him, and the 2 Samoan guys.
Well, you're probably talking about, used to be Tio Taylor and Reno Tafuli. There was a couple of Samoan. Yeah,
Tafuli, yeah, definitely. And I'm sure they could have interviewed, but you didn't have time. For a guy to do a 20-second interview, if each of us get 20 seconds, that's no good.
Right.
Gary could do it all, put it all together, get a ton of heat. We're all sitting there nodding our head like, yeah, he's our boss, and we're part of this, we're liking it. But looking back now, I probably needed it, because of my own heat from having had blowoffs. I lost a lot of matches and I lost my heat, some of my heat along the way. This was a good way to rejuvenate it. Another one was when Bobby Orton Jr. and I tagged up. I started a whole new ball of wax.
So you're going to suffer an injury here in March of 76, and you'll be out for a couple months. So I want to talk to you all about that on the next episode, because I feel like that's going to be a nice chunk of the the show, discussing everything that went into that, how it came about, what you were doing in the off time there, and getting back into things. And then, of course, the Steve Kearns stuff will be next episode too. So we'll save two really big storylines, if you will, for the next show, Bob. But I did have another name I wanted to throw at you here this week, if you have time for it.
I got all the time in the world for you, Ray.
Okay, well, that's awesome.
You're the one making this happen, of course.
Well, I was hoping we would get to Bob Orton, but I really didn't know how long the segment on Kevin Sullivan would run, so I was just playing this one by ear. But there were just some names I jotted down. Big Bad John was one of them, because I know you had crossed paths with him prior, so I was going to drop him here. But there's another name that you mentioned here twice this week, and I don't know why it didn't dawn on me to ask you up until this point, but Pak Song. You got to work around Pak Song a little bit. Can you elaborate or share any stories in regards to Pak Song?
They pulled a rib on him. The rib was somebody who got over by using a chop, where they chop a board.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the board, it needed to be dried wood, because green wood, it'll bend, but it won't. You could put a fairly small 2x4 on two rocks, and I'd say it's only 4 inches off the ground, and you could go up and have Mad Mountain Mike stand on it, and it would bend down to where the bottom of the 2x4 would be on the ground, but it would just bend. It wouldn't break, because it's green. It's not dry yet. Once it's dry, then he could step on it and break. So instead of somebody substituted for the board, they substituted for the dry board. They supplied a wet one. He hit it 5 or 6 times, and it wouldn't break. So I had to do the interview over and get the wood back. But the poor guy busted his hand open. I think it was Pak Song. He was a real quiet guy. I never rode in a car with him, so I didn't get to know him very well. He was, the guy looked sick. Frankly, he had this great big head, and he was tall. He was big for Oriental. And I don't mean to be, I'm not trying to be racially sensitive here, but he's Korean, I think. And I spent a week in Seoul, Korea, and there weren't a lot of tall people. There were some, but the majority, I think the average height for men was about 5'7". So when he got his 6'4", he really stand out. But, he was a good talent. He had a lot of guts. He wasn't afraid of any. I mean, he wasn't looking for trouble, but he didn't have any problem going out there and getting all the heat he could, and having Gary in your corner. Now, we're talking about somebody who's got guts. Just being a manager, just standing out on the apron, and they're even in the corner. You can't get up on the apron when the match is going on. You got to be there in the corner with your back to the people, to the fans. But I had all the respect in the world for guys like Gary Hart, some of the great managers who had the guts to stand out there, do something really horrible,
right,
and then get back out there on the ground. Now, Gary had his act together. If he was going to do something that where he was going to need protection, he would either let us know or let the cops know, or somehow if they gave him a finish. Say we were in Tampa and they gave him a finish, you're going to do this. You're going to hit somebody with a cane or the bell or something. Gary would make sure that he would have his back, somebody would be there to cover his back. He might have one or two of us come down there or something beforehand to be down there. But Gary had a lot of guts. He was good mouthpiece. That Chicago punk thing, he was very, very convincing with that. He got heat just looking at him. He looked like a punk. Yeah, he was very, very good. Pak Song was like, I don't want to say an empty vessel. In my book, Deathmatch,
mm-hmm.
I talk about Pak Song. I write about Pak Song wrestling, and he was very believable. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And he could get a lot of heat. He'd hit those chops coming off the ropes, and you could hear it smack. Basically, that was all he could do. He was a good talent. It seemed like a nice enough guy. Very quiet, though.
Yeah, he spent a lot of time specifically in the Florida territory. I mean, he worked with Terry Funk there. He worked with Jack Briscoe there. He was a major part of Dusty Rhodes going babyface and becoming that American dream against the evil Korean, the 6'6" Pak Song. So he certainly played a big part in Florida in the 1970s.
Well, if he helped make Dusty by being actually the one that did the turn, he's famous. But just that alone, he's a key part of Dusty's career.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously it worked. He was somebody you could go against it. It worked.
Right. He was a guy that did work a little bit everywhere. He went over and worked for Baba in All Japan. Inoki booked him over in South Korea to wrestle Antonio Inoki somewhere, probably right here in 76. So it had to be somewhere around this time.
Well, if Pak Song was Korean, I wonder if it was in Seoul or anywhere in Korea. I wonder if Pak Song was the heel or babyface. I don't know if Japanese TV went into Korea or not, but I know that Il Kim, when Lars and I wrestled there, Il Kim was like he was the babyest of babyfaces, believe me.
Right.
Everybody believed that he could walk on water. Yeah, Pak Song was. I think that the guy probably made a lot of money. I hope he did, because he had to pay the price. Did he settle in the United States, would you know?
I know he passed away in Korea. I'm not really sure. The last couple of years of his life have been kind of an anomaly. Nobody really knows exactly what transpired in his life. He finishes up wrestling, as best I remember, around the end of 1980. I mean, he was still in his 30s, but he had that genetic disorder. I think it was called Marfan syndrome. No, it was Marfan syndrome or something like that. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But he passes away a couple years later. He passes away in 82 at the age of 39. Wow. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. That's so young. Well, Pak Song seemed to be, guy was, you know what? He was almost invisible because he was very quiet, kept himself, and didn't say much. I wish I'd gotten to know him better, but I don't know. Well, one thing or another, it just didn't work out. I said on earlier programs that I staged myself a lot, not from any desire that I didn't like people, but after my opposition things didn't work, I had lost my overall affection for the collective boys, as it was. So no reflection on them, just my own problems. But
it was nice to get a few guys in here this week, talk a little bit about Pak Song, share a little rib there, Big Bad John coming to town, and obviously we discussed Kevin Sullivan at length. I was hoping to get to your team with Bob Orton this week, but it just wasn't meant to be. We will pick up next episode because that is what's next on the docket, guys. You're about to team up with Bob. You guys are just Bob and Bob, and you guys get thrown out there for a tag team match, and something clicks, something works, because within a matter of a couple weeks, you guys are working Dusty and Eddie Graham. What a tag team. Oh, my God. Eddie and Mike Graham, Jack and Jerry Briscoe, Dino Bravo, Dick Slater. The list goes on and on. We're going to talk about your time teaming with Bob Orton here in the early part of 76. We're going to talk about the injury you sustained in the latter half of March here in 76, your return in the month of May, and then your feud with Steve Keirn through the summer of 76. What a wild one that's going to be. What a great story. What a great feud. What a great time to be had next time here on the Stoop.
Well, it sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. I appreciate the day. Again, I want to go again on record that I hope Kevin rest in peace. My memory of him, any negatives are gone or forgotten. I'm remembering him with the affection I felt for him, because for me personally, for my health, my mental and emotional health, I try to focus on positives rather than negatives. Things I can change, I will try, but if I can, I just shine them on. And that way I can try to have some peace in my life. But Kevin, I've got a lot of good things to remember about him, and that's what I choose to remember. Him, I still picture him making those interviews out there in California and bringing his dad on the TV on the show with him and all that. And I feel all the affection. Now I feel all the affection I felt for him then, and I'm glad to be able to feel that. So thank you for letting me pay tribute to him, Ray. I really appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. I felt like it needed to be done. Somebody such a figure throughout the history of wrestling. And I knew you would spend some time with him, so it was definitely something we should have touched on here this week. And I'm glad we were able to do that. And hopefully everybody enjoyed the program overall. We did cover a little bit of your Florida run here, but when we get back into things, we're really going to get into the meat, because the two big things you do here in 76 is your tag team with Bob Orton, and then, of course, your giant feud with Steve Keirns. So we'll be discussing both of those on the next episode. Looking forward to that and so much more, guys, as we continue on here. Bob, thank you once again.
Okay, great. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it. You folks out there listening, thank you very much. We're in this together. We couldn't be here without you. So stay well. We'll be talking to you next time.
And that's going to do it here this week for the Wrestling Stoop. Just a reminder, you guys can friend Bob Roop over at facebook.com/poorBobRoop. And you can find me, Ray Russell. Follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. But most of all, I encourage everybody to go over to patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. So many great gifts there, including early show releases, digital downloads, video casts now available, and so much more. Check it out over at Patreon. Help support the brand. And until next time, on behalf of Bob, we ask you guys to hold tight and see where we head next time. Right here on the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop.